r/ask Reddit. Bounces of Reddit. Have you ever crossed paths with someone you've had to throw out of a club or bar? How was the experience? I bounced off and on for about 15 years in the same mid-sized city, about 150k people. One night as people were leaving, this guy sucker punched another patron right inside the door. Several other people quickly got involved. I grabbed Mr. Sucker Punch and he spins around and squares up with me. I guess because I'm tall, 6'6". People always seem to try and rush me and wrestle me by the waist. Mr. SP was no different. We end up wrestling for a second before I finally get a solid grip on him. He's still trying to fight at this point. I ended up picking him up and throwing him through the exit doors, breaking one of them off the hinges. About a week later, I'm out to eat with my mom of all people, and in walks Mr. Sucker Punch and sits down 2 tables over. I wasn't particularly worried about it, but I really didn't want to have to beat someone up in front of my mom. About 5 minutes later, I see him talking to the waitress and she makes her way over to our table. That guy over there said you threw him through a door the other night at the bar. He wanted me to tell you he's sorry for being a dumb drunk. Well, at least he wasn't too salty about it. It's often the hardest thing to accept that you were wrong. I think that makes sense. I doubt anyone wants to be in that position where they're violent and drunk and need the bouncer to throw them out. Everyone's out there to have fun and the bouncer isn't the fun police. He's there to keep them safer. Not a bouncer but a former bartender. I had to call the cops on a couple who had become angry and violent during a Sunday brunch. Both were arrested. The husband threw a glass at me, but the wife started swinging at the cop, so she got the worst of it. Rumor has it the husband was released later that day, but the wife spent a few days in jail. A few weeks later, I was in Walmart and spotted the couple. The wife didn't see me, but the husband did. We both walked away in opposite directions without saying a word, but truth be told, I was terrified. It happened fairly frequently with the regulars. As long as they weren't fighting, they'd be allowed back in the next night. Usually they were pretty embarrassed and apologize for being a drunken jackass. One time I did have to kick out a good friend because he got in a fight. He was in a bad place and was pretty embarrassed by the whole thing. We didn't really talk about it much afterwards. That was over a decade ago, and we're still friends today, and he's settled down and doesn't drink like he used to. My buddy owned a bar. They had a way of dealing with regulars who got out of hand on occasion. They used to say they would 68 people instead of 86. It didn't mean you were banned. It just meant you couldn't come back for a while, like a suspension for a month or 2 depending on the infraction, just to let the other people cool down and decide they weren't pissed off at you anymore. I used to bounce at a club in Annapolis, if you can call throwing drunk spoiled little rich idiots out of the bar bouncing. 3 guys I had thrown out a few weeks prior saw me in a Shoppers grocery store. They started following me, first talking shit and then throwing food at me. I left my cart, walked through the 3 of them and told them to meet me outside. They called the police, and when the police showed up, the 3 stooges didn't leave the store until then. The manager lady nicely and happily explained to the police what they had done and they were arrested for throwing store items. Never saw them again. I remember one called himself Big Country, a fat sloppy idiot thrown out of the Navy for being a ducking moron. I'm not a bouncer, but in my youth I got thrown out of a bar for taking a picture of my wife. We were young then, lol, and were out drinking. They let women dance on the bar some nights. My wife starts doing it, so I snap a pic to show her after. Never in my life have I seen so many bouncers jump onto someone. Me. I got kicked out. I was able to come back later, after my wife confirmed it was me, her husband taking the photo. Ex-pub manager here. One evening I had a group of drunken young idiots who started a fight in my pub, which needless to say ended up with them getting kicked out. Fast forward a few weeks and I was having breakfast in a local cafe with one of my bar staff before opening when said group walked in and immediately recognized me. Cue the verbal abuse and threatening behavior, so I finished up and left. But it did not end there. My friend had managed to keep most of the in the cafe. He half knew them, but one strolled out straight up to me and dislocated my jaw with a right hook, followed by several kicks to the back as I went down. Needless to say, that day is why I no longer work in the pub trade. Honestly, duck people. I was a bouncer in a higher end Toronto club in 2001. People were generally respectful and just out to have a fun night. The only real memorable ejection was from a couple we caught having sex in the ladies' washroom. It was very awkward. We had to ensure that it was consensual and ask them to stop and then escort them out because the bathroom facilities were limited to 3 or 4 stalls per gendered washroom. There was a long lineup for the ladies' room. The couple then had to do the walk of shame past the long washroom lineup. They were then escorted from the establishment. Good, women's restrooms already take way too long and have queues that go on forever. Not a bouncer, but have been kicked out. Was at Mally Bar in Newtown, Sydney with some friends in 2012. I had just bought my first drink of the night and had about 2 sips when a girl in my group, who had been drinking all night, started dancing near us. Eventually she bumped into me, causing my drink to slosh a bit and spill. Nothing too major. The bouncer noticed from all the way across the bar and pointed to me and beckoned me over. When I got over to this massive 6'5", 300 pounds guy, he told me I had to leave because I was too drunk. I tried to explain to him that this was only my first drink and the girl bumped into me and he wasn't having any of it. I refused to leave since I had spent $15 on a drink I had taken 2 sips of, and there was still plenty left. He took my drink and told me to wait there, returning with $15 and told me to get the duck out of the bar. Reluctantly, but with my $15 back, I decided to leave and not cause trouble. When I got outside, I called one of my friends and told him to meet me outside, where I told him what happened and asked him to switch shirts with me. I walked right up to the door and that same bouncer handed him my ID and got let in without him even recognizing me. I've never spent any meaningful time inside of a bar before, but I think it's safe to say that bouncer was not very good at his job. I own a small restaurant with a bar and we have to 86 people a few times a year. One of them was a regular who just got a little too racist. We all hated him anyways and were just waiting for him to screw up. He did. We had to drag him out. Total scene. I see him all the time. If he's drunk, he will talk shit to me but I just walk away. He's a sad, drunk old man who's already filled with misery. Punching him in the mouth wouldn't solve anything. Maybe he's never been punched in the mouth. Could be the problem. I was a bouncer years and years ago. I had to throw out a friend of mine. He didn't pick fights or anything, but was becoming abusive to the staff. When he sobered up, he felt really bad about it and came back to apologize. I did some work bouncing in the early 90s and had to throw a couple of guys out for getting hammered and harassing the bar girls. Well, after work I was walking to my car and heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and it was those 2 guys from earlier. I figured it was going to be a fight but they wanted to thank me. Turns out one of them had a sister who had been assaulted some years before. They said once they sobered up and realized they were acting inappropriately with the girls on staff, they felt bad. I once went to a pub and realized I knew the bouncer from elsewhere. She was a nude model at an art class I attended. So by night she works in security and by day she works without insecurity. By day, people put her on a canvas. By night she puts rowdy people on the canvas. I've been a bouncer for almost 4 years, so I have some stories. I work in a small music venue nightclub and one night we hosted a rave night. Now, most of these guys are late 20s, early 30s and it seems like all of them have a lot of money. So obviously we were charging £20 on the door since we could fill the place out even if we were charging people a lot to get in. Now this one guy didn't want to pay that much and decided he would have a go of trying to sneaking in and telling me he already paid, which he obviously didn't as I've been on the door all day and never left that spot. Anyway, he's arguing with me, throwing all his credit and debit cards at me, so I'm annoyed and go to pick them up until he slaps me on the top of the head with one of his cards. Now I pride myself on being calm and rarely ever having to put my hand on someone. But this guy went too far, so I put him in a headlock and dragged him out while his friends are laughing at him. Oh, did I mention to get into the out bar you have to go down a flight of stairs? Well, imagine how hard it is to get someone out who doesn't want to leave. Well, I and the other bouncer carried this guy up the stairs and dumped him outside. Anyway, about 2 weeks later and shopping in Morrison's supermarket, and he spot me and approached me. He apologized and he wanted to make it up to me, so paid for my meal deal and shook my hand, so I would say that one went pretty well. Shame you didn't keep your cool. Could have just stood there, arms crossed as the card ricochets off your head and said total 007 style. Sorry sir, it appears your payment has bounced. No, but it was specifically not interacting with the person that makes all the difference in my story. Also, important to note that I am not a professional bouncer. This was my first time bouncing and only did it because I was dead broke. I worked some random dive bar and everything was fine going into the night. Mostly regulars and a couple randos just having a good time. This table of about 6 people were getting a little loud and taking shot after shot. I kept my eye on them but they didn't do anything to warrant an intervention. An hour before close, as the group goes up to the bar to close their tabs, a guy and a girl in the group started arguing and the guy pours his Corona all over the girl. As I walk up to eject them, the guy turns his beer bottle around and holds it like a weapon and taunts me to come at him. My inexperience as a bouncer probably plays a hand in this next decision, because I still wonder what the right move as a bouncer would have been. I rush him and overpower him and hold him down until he's calm. I escort him out and talk to him outside. He tries to walk back in after I tell him to have a good night. He starts getting physical again, but this time he knocks me onto my back and gets on top of me. I have no idea why he didn't ground and pound me right there. We tussle for a bit. At this point I've pulled his braids. We've both choked each other and we're both scraped up and bleeding. His group eventually comes out and pulls him away and they all leave. I go back in and make sure all the patrons left and pick up the chairs and tables we've knocked over. We also broke the bar's front door in the scuffle. I go home and clean up, wake up with bumps and bruises and work the door again the next day. The same group comes in but without the guy. They end up talking to me. The girl thanks me. I don't know why. And the other guys tell me how lucky I am because that was the day he left his house without his gun. Apparently they all met up at one of their friends' house before going out and the guy mentioned how pissed he was that he left it at home. I quit that night and never bounced again. $60 and some chicken wings a night is not worth losing my life over. You shoulder called the cops the moment he brandished the bottle, assuming you have decent camera footage. That would have been enough to pin him. Only if he actually went for you should you have gotten physical. Other than that, rushing him is still better than getting blindsided. Regular bar hopper here. I got cut off and asked to leave a club a couple times for being too drunk. It was a regular party place for me. Get hired a couple years ago at a serving job and I'm talking to the manager. Just having a chat after the job offer. We both realize we know the other. He was the bouncer who asked me to leave. Had a good laugh about it. We had friends in common too. It was a small city, 300,000-ish. A lot of students, and the restaurant club scene wasn't huge. So me working in the industry also meant that the people I partied with were also the bouncers and bartenders that served us. Edited for clarity. Sweet girl came up to me at the mall. Said I threw her out because she was sloppy drunk. Asked me if she could come back. Apparently she took me saying, "Don't come back," as don't ever come back here. I would have taken it the same way too, honestly. I used to work with a guy who was a bouncer where he told me that he used to work at a club where a local gang would hang out. He said that he'd tolerate them as long as they didn't start any trouble until one day one of them showed up with a serrated bread knife and threatened to stab him if he didn't let them through. What the hell kind of gang has a guy dumb enough to try and stab someone with a bread knife, lol. I bounced for years. I've never ran into anyone I removed from the bar. If I did, I didn't recall them. Have a boring true answer. Former bouncer here. Yes, it has happened. They normally just avoid eye contact. Not a bouncer but a bartender. A local got super wasted and grabbed the other bartender, also the manager's wife, by the throat and tried to shove her down some stairs. Luckily she was very feisty and he was hammered so he did not succeed. The manager was a 6 feet 5 inches ex-pro baseball player and grabbed the guy and threw him on the ground, where he pretended to pass out. He kept popping his head up and looking around with one eye before going back to playing dead. The whole bar wanted MGR to beat the snot out of the guy, but he called the cops and the ambulance, who convinced him he was not in need of medical assistance and removed him. Went to a bar once with a few friends and one of my friends was pretty drunk and put his head down on a table. I got up to go have a piss and get stopped by security who tell me to leave because I was falling asleep at a table when it clearly wasn't me. I used to bartend at the time and about a week later the security guy who kicked me out came in and sat at the bar I was working at. I told our security to escort him out for falling asleep at the bar. Did the dude see you and know? Or was it meant to be anonymous? Unfortunately I don't think he saw me. He was arguing with the security as they were walking him out. I wish he did see me, then I would have waved at him. I'm not a bouncer but I went to school with a guy who became one. Unfortunately for me, he thought I had been banned from the bar he worked at in a case of mistaken identity. But because he knew me, he'd always recognize me if I tried to go in and stop me. I ended up having to go in another time and meet the manager so they'd tell him to stop throwing me out. It wasn't mistaken identity, he just didn't tell like you. This one guy in his 40s I bet came into my bar once and was clearly on a new level of drunk for himself. This was around Christmas time and it's normal to have people who don't normally drink much come in and not be used to drinking. Basically it's a really shitty time to work in a bar. Anyways, he got so wasted we eventually had to take him outside. He was hitting on girls half his age and was just generally obnoxious. Mind you, bar was one where 18-20-year-olds would hang. More a club really, so he was very much out of his element. We had stand there for 3 hours while he was stood there yelling at us and spitting at us until the cops had time to come. Again, Christmas. They came and I walked out to talk to them. Then as I was walking past him he clocked me in the back of the head, in front of 2 cops and 3 bouncers. Suffice to say he was eating pavement faster than I could react to the hit. Couple days later he came back, literal hats in hand, and apologized to no end. Was very clear he was remorseful. Dude had just turned 45 and his wife had left him right before Christmas. He was just in a really bad spot that night and got a bit too much. I get it. I didn't press charges and he bought us bouncers a really nice bottle of cognac each. Now I didn't drink back then but my stepdad got a really nice gift that year. Never saw the guy since. Been thrown out by bouncers and met them later. They don't care what happens after. That's just their job to do at the time. I used to bartend, and I wouldn't hold any reservations for someone I have kicked out my pub previously. Think it's the same for door staff. I had to drag a guy out by the collar once. I had several reports that he had been groping women. When I confronted him about it we wouldn't look me in the eye or acknowledge me at all. I gave him plenty of chances to give his side of the story. Since he continued to act like I was a ghost, I didn't find his side of the story convincing enough and told him he had to go. Still sat there like a statue, so I grabbed him by the shirt and dragged him out the side gate and kicked him onto the sidewalk. Total weirdo. I worked the door at a punk dive bar. Big part of the job is bouncing people who've had too much with the attitude "it's cool dude, we're all friends, but you've had enough tonight, come back tomorrow." 99% of people that's fine and it works. One dude who had probably smoked some meth that night was fixated on the bartender wearing a Superman shirt and ran home to shave his head and came back challenging him to a fight. I urged him outside to get ready for the fight with a pre-fight smoke. We smoked cigarettes and gently convinced him it was time to go home, which worked until he got halfway down the street and sprinted back and threw himself at the door screaming, "Superman! Superman! You can't hide from Lex Luthor! Superman!" One of the bartenders exited out of the side entrance and started yelling, "Holy shit, all the cops are coming." Everybody run and the dude disappeared. I saw him at the corner bodega the next afternoon and he looked at me and smiled and said, "I might have been a handful last night. Sorry, see you tonight." Where I live I saw people escorted from clubs on a nightly basis. 90% of the time it's a right-wing yuppie D-bag in a suit making fun of rockers in a rock club. You know, I'm an associate at Barnes & Barnes. I made more in my bonus than you make all year. Tries to take a swing at someone. They escort him out. Very, very common. When I was freshly 21 I used to hang out at one of the local bars almost daily. My ex and I were going through a rough breakup and constantly getting coked up and then arguing or getting way too drunk and getting cut off by one of the bartenders. One day he cut me off and I called him a jackass and left no tip, which is extremely uncharacteristic of me. I stopped going to that bar for years because I was ashamed of myself. Cue several years later and I'm starting a new bartending job and lo and behold, it's the guy I called a jackass who's training me. Since then he's gotten me into another great job and we've actually become quite good friends. Might even start living together. It's a happy ending with a messy beginning. Not answering the question, but this is my experience with bouncers throwing people out of clubs. My family friend got too drunk one night at a club and ended up in a fight with another person there. He was a small frail man who couldn't hurt a 300-pound bouncer if they wanted to. Two bouncers grab him by an arm each and throw him head first out of the club onto the pavement. His head hits the concrete first, killing him. Now my experience. My first ever club night out was on my 18th birthday UK, so I went with all my friends to celebrate. I am very distinguishable as I am 6'6" around 200 centimeters tall and blonde. Some other tall blonde guy was pushing people around on the dance floor and was brought to the attention of the bouncers. I'm in the toilet at the time and hear a lot of commotion outside the toilet stall. They start opening all the stall doors, shouting and swearing, and start to rattle my door. I say, in a calm voice, "Come on guys, I'm trying to take a piss here." At which point the door is kicked open, breaking the lock and slamming into the center of my forehead. Blood pours down my face as a huge bouncer gets up right into my face and starts threatening me with his fist. Two guys behind him start saying "oh shit, that's not him," and the bouncer realizes the mistake and simply walks away. At this point I am bleeding profusely from my forehead and in need of a doctor, but that does not seem to matter to the bouncer who just split my head open. He walks off and I am forced to stumble to my girlfriend, who finds me a first aid person at the club. I reported the bouncer and nothing was ever done about it. I have had many other foul experiences with bouncers possibly looking to pick, etc. I am the least violent person you will meet. I have never punched anyone in my life and never raised my voice. I know not all bouncers are like this, but there are too many power-hungry built guys just looking to control people in this profession. I'm not a bouncer, but I've been regular enough as a patron and performer at a particular bar to see people get bounced fairly often. It's the kind of place where most of the patrons are regulars, and a few of them just overindulge sometimes. Most of the time, it's not a problem. They sober up and when they show up the next weekend and everyone's cool. There was one guy though that got a permaban. I'm not even sure what for, but he had been a problem in many ways for a while. And he showed up later with a knife. They had to lock the door and call police, who found him pounding on the door while everyone was still inside drinking and dancing. That guy eventually got his shit together, but not until spending a few stints in jail and having a couple of restraining orders against him. Bartender, not a bouncer. I work at an event space and at a restaurant. I bartended a wedding at the event space and had to kick a guy out because he would not stop vaping inside and coming behind the bar to try and steal beers. It's a ducking open bar, dipshit. You don't have to steal. Got up and went to work my brunch shift the next morning, and this same dipshit strolls in with his girlfriend and a couple others. He sits down and orders a sisar from me. Does not recognize me though. I don't remember exactly how it came up, but at one point he tells me I'm a better bartender than the a-hole bartender that kicked me out of my best friend's wedding for no reason. I said that was me. His friends laughed at him and called him a ducking moron. He finished eating very quickly and his girlfriend left me a very nice tip. I have thrown many people out of many bars in my lifetime. More often than not, if I encounter them in the wild, they will apologize for that night and whatever happened. I'd laugh, say no big deal, see you soon, and they will come back to the bar eventually. I'd wave, sometimes buy their first drink, and after that they were model patrons. People get drunk and sometimes are a-holes. No need to hold a grudge for it. You show them respect while escorting them out and show respect the next time you see them. You will rarely have an issue with them again. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.